Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Fuentes. So like Dr. Fuentes said, my name is Rachel Gleitman, and this is Maria Franshaw. I was a 2012 graduate and then did the 4-1, so 2013. I'm in my 6th year of teaching, and I'm teaching 2nd grade. We're from River Oaks Baptist School in Houston, and that's where I met up with Maria.
And so this is my 30th year in math education. If you're thinking if you can be in it that long, you can. Stick with it. I have 3 adult sons. Any native Houstonians in here? Houston? There you go. So you know where ROB is. We love to call it ROB in Houston. We are both from there. And sent my youngest off to college, and I went back to get my doctorate. So I'm just doing a lot of things right now. So Rachel and I are so excited to share with you today. We're going to go back and forth on some things, and then you guys are going to get up and come down here and do some work like our 2nd graders have been doing, because hands-on is the best learning. So we are assured that you guys are going to love that. So thanks for being here on a Friday afternoon. We choose, everything up here is chosen intentionally, like we worked on this, and we did this twice at the state math conference in July. So we believe that what we have done with our kids is really to help them construct so much of their own learning. So we do have cards or contact information. If you're thinking about moving to Houston, want to be in touch with us, we'll give you our email addresses. And if you don't get it today, Dr. Fuentes will have it. So just to warm up your brains a little bit, take a quick look at the screen. And then share with a seat neighbor what you saw and how you saw it, really quickly. Okay, can you give me a thumbs up? It's the easiest way if you're familiar with this. Okay, so we call this perceptual subitizing. Anybody want to share like their quick understanding of what perceptual subitizing is? Yes? When you can look at something of things and know what number is. Exactly. Quick recognition of quantity. That was awesome. She might need a little giveaway. That was awesome. So perceptual subitizing, we start this in pre-K and K, and then we continue to this next step. So take another quick look. It doesn't get easier, so look, really look. Okay, talk to a different seat neighbor and make sure you're talking about how you saw the quantity you saw. Okay, so that transitions you into conceptual subitizing, this is a little sensitive, taking your perceived understanding of quantity and putting it together. And so these are some of the ways our 2nd and 1st graders have shared with us seeing this. Maybe you're a person who saw 2 on the outside, 2 on the inside in that middle column. Or maybe you saw the 4 corners in the middle column. Or maybe you still have some 3, 3, and 1 in there. Maybe you saw the 6 from the dice pattern, which we do tons of dice with our kids, which we have some concerns about for their futures, but we're letting it go. We just roll dice all the time in math class. So, okay, one more quick look. Okay, one last chat with your neighbors about this. Go ahead. Okay, here are some things our kiddos have shared with us. And the great thing about continuing to push this through into 2nd grade, so we do it in pre-K, K 1st and 2nd, is that we work so much with first part of a 5 frame, the 5 frame part of a 10 frame, and then 10s, and then to double 10 frames. And our kids literally will start seeing quantity by taking away what's not there. So we really do have kids say it's 20 minus the 1s in the corner, or 20 minus 2. So this getting familiar with a sense of quantity is part of really the power of what we have done with our kids. And this is the 2nd year of us really stepping away from our curriculum. That is fantastic. We do love it, and adding something that we thought that our kids needed, and Rachel's going to talk more about that later, and really having the confidence as a teacher to do this for your kids, takes a lot of work. So really helping them internalize more of what you said to get perceptual subitizing doesn't just have to be 3, but you're pushing their level of perceptual subitizing up through quantities 11 to 20. So you may feel a little bit like this today. This is Rachel's grant from last year. This is our goal to do what Piaget decades ago claimed was putting kids in disequilibrium, really putting them in a discomfortable place, a place of discomfort to help them really construct their own knowledge. And this is one of our favorite pictures from last year because he was in serious disequilibrium. Rachel's going to tell you later how he got out of that. You can see what's going on. And she probably wants me to tell you already, those are not all of her base 10 blocks. We literally borrowed from every second grade room and every third grade room, and then I would take them room to room to room when we did this with the kids. So a quick overview for you, what we're going to do just in the next hour. I'm going to give you the rationale, talk a little bit about numeracy, and talk about the TEKS, because I think that's important to do in Texas, so you know that we haven't totally thrown out our state standards and are doing something totally bootleg, and then we're going to hop down here and get going on activities. So our goal really for you today is hands-on learning just like the kids. So one of the really important things, and I believe that Rachel has some questions from you guys about this, is that math is not being taught the way I learned it, and you're teaching it probably differently than you learned it too. We have such a desire to help kids construct their thinking. The history of how we got here in elementary, middle, and high school math is a presentation completely unto itself. The way that math education was constructed in the United States was kind of an afterthought from the space race. That's just the short version of a much longer story. So math education is really catching up where reading education has been for years and years and years. So it's okay, we're playing catch up and we're making really great strides. But I will tell you, if you guys are mostly going EC, you are such a huge thing for these kids because aside from their parents and their households, you are the first line for them. And if you can get them loving math and making it hands-on for them, you're going to be helping them, and you're really going to be helping so much of our economy because we need more mathies. This wasn't one of Rachel's favorite slides, but it's one of my favorite slides. It's growing on her. And I have this up here, one, because I believe it, and two, to really push your boundaries of thinking on it. Literally in 2018, I will still have a parent walk into back to school night and say, on the down low, I just want you to know I'm not good at math and my daughter's not going to be good at math either. It's 2018. I'm living for the year when that will stop. I really am. Because if that doesn't stop soon, our U.S. economy is just going to be continuing to rely on many, many foreign entities and foreign products. And so I want this to be thought-provoking for you. So literally, people will be okay saying, I'm not good at math, but they're saying the word enumerate. This word's been around since the late 1800s. This word's been around since 1959. Yuck. We're trying to get rid of that. We don't want people to feel illiterate, and we don't want them to feel enumerate either. So we're living in a place where we have a really robust community that has parent education that's really committed to really strong math program for kids all the way up. So just a couple thoughts for you to make this come to life for you. You plan on putting up an alphabet in your classroom, I'm assuming? Yeah? So hopefully you're planning on putting a number line up, right? This is good. If you start the number line at 1 or 0, let's say you put 0 in there, how much are you really showing the kids? Literally half. Half plus 0. You're only showing them half. So I would advocate for you to put negative numbers up in your classroom. It doesn't matter what age you're teaching. You need to put them up there. You don't teach Q, Y, J, whatever else. You pick it in kindergarten and first grade, right? But you put the letters up there. So when you are in your own classroom, make sure you have some spectrum of negative numbers up there because you don't know what kids are sitting there thinking about it. And we will have every year a kindergartner or a first grader say, do you know that if you start at 2, you can get to the other side of 0? Those are really incredible conversations. Just like you have early readers, you can have early math thinkers. So we just wanted to share that with you. Another way to look at it is comparing some ELA components to some math components. You know, people love to say, oh, you teach math. That's easy, but I teach spelling, grammar, mechanics, all these other things. Well, math has so many components to it. So I just kind of throw this out to you as a comparison of what what could be. So why number sense? Because that's our focus today. Because we've grown to understand that just because a kiddo can count is not evidence that they understand what they're saying. Music is a beautiful thing. We love to put math to music. It's really great. But you can have kindergartners sing-songing on the 100th day of school, and then if you ask them what 35 plus 5 is, they have no idea. But they can sing 5, 10, 15, 20 all around the whole school. That memorizing isn't evidence of knowing. And that faster isn't better. Some of you may have been traumatized by math fact, mad minute tests. Yeah, well, we now know that that's really bad for you because you get anxious and then it shuts off your working memory, and then that's not good. We don't teach borrowing because you're not going to give it back. And so I have to do my really bad example for the kids of, can I borrow a tissue and then pretend to give it back? Because you're not borrowing from the tens and the hundreds. You're not doing that. So we really try to do a lot of helping them build a deeper understanding, and we make it as concrete as we can until we can see that they're ready to move to the pictorial or representational. And this is not just in elementary. We do this, I also teach algebra on our campus. We do this for kiddos, and we talk about like terms in lower school with the hundreds and the tens and the ones, like we do x's and x squareds. It wouldn't have been great for someone to do that for you, so when you got to algebra, you weren't freaking out about x's. So this really just models how we feel about what happened with the kiddos, going from this really great number sense, perceptual subitizing and conceptual subitizing, and then all of a sudden there was like, hey, let's start computing. And we were like, wait, we're not bridging them to the other side. So we felt like there was this wide gulf in between, and we really wanted to push their thinking to get them there. So that's kind of the space that we're living in with you today, is the space between getting fluent with numbers before you're getting to computation. And so you know that we have process standards and content standards. And so where we are with the process standards, as you can imagine, as you'll experience today, communication, collaboration, sharing critical thinking, justifying your thinking. And then in the content standards, this just lives totally in number and operation. We wanted to make sure you guys knew that. A couple other things. You may or may not end up in a school where you use a number grid. Did you guys use a number grid do you remember using a number grid when you were in elementary? Yeah, right. It seems like it's a big new thing. Rachel's going to dig into some of our thinking about that, but we wanted to take this opportunity to say, if you do, just remember that's a lot of numbers on a page. When the children are little, think about how few words are on the page of a book, right? The font is huge and the words are few. So we have, you really, when you go out, I'm sure Dr. Fuentes has told you, you need to make what works for you, for your kids. We made number grids with a reading row for our young kids so they have a place for their finger. It's just a Word document. It's really easy. So make sure there's so many ways you can scaffold for your kids. We also made one that starts at 0 and goes up. We'll see what happens with that in the future. So when kids are young, you guys have talked about this, I'm sure, too, their whole sense of using a number line is hard. Because you don't want them counting the numbers on the number line, right? They're counting the quantity and the distance in between. And so we use number paths. We really try to stay away from the hundreds grid for a while. Rachel's going to talk more about that. And so just giving them small numbers to work with has really made a difference too. So we've made the changes in second grade that we're going to share, but I also went after these vertically in K through 3. So that's one of the powerful things about working together and being at a small school. So I wanted to show you a little bit about what happens with our kindergartners. And then in first grade, we go after a lot of place value and really sums to 10 and really working through that. Obviously, we scaffold for striving kiddos and differentiate and extend for kiddos who are ready for more. But we really had a moment last year in first grade where we were having difficulty with the kiddos really putting together all these different names for numbers. They were really having a hard time with it. And so I just came up with this. It has changed tremendously. You turn so much into a game for kids. It's fun. So they are number detectives. And so all we did was give them different representations of numbers. This is the very first page. So we shared and talked about this in class. We built this together first, and then the next day they got this representation. But just turning it into a game made it so fun for them. So, you know, this is going to happen to you too. You teach it, you say it, you could do it 12 times. And 3 months down the road, you have a little kid tug on the leg of your pants and goes, wait, did you know that 33 has 3 10s and 3 1s? And you're like, this is really good. I'm so glad you're with us now. And you're like, we talked about that 3 months ago. It's okay. But you're here now, and that's the most important thing. So you never know when that light bulb is going to come on. It's kind of like you don't know the day kids are going to read, but you just keep pouring into them. The same thing happens in math. So you think it's really straightforward, but it's really funny. That story happened to me. I walked in one day, and Will was like, oh my gosh. I was like, Will, that's so exciting. You have to celebrate all those small moments. So that's just a little intro and background, and I'm going to turn it over to Rachel. Oh, yes, switch.
Here. This is not part of my daily get up, so this one's a new one for me. Okay, so what we started to realize is when we reflected on our curriculum from the summer or from the year before, we realized that our students needed more number sense and more experiences with number sense. And so what did that look like? Well, we knew we needed some more hands-on opportunities. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through some of the activities that we do in my classroom and the other second grade classrooms. And I want you to think with the perspective of a second grade student. And then we'll switch off and put on a teacher hat and we'll discuss. So right now there are some red buckets that are going to come down your row. If you could go ahead and grab one at the end. And we're going to go through a number grid activity. Now, these number grids were given to our students. And what we did is we had them go as following. We had them shade the yellow for even numbers, orange for odd numbers. We circled multiples of 5. And then we told them, keep the blank column and cut from least to greatest. Now, for purposes of time, these are authentically children-made number grids. My kiddos were coloring away, and we had lots of them.
So as you pass it, grab scissors and tape for every 2 people.
Yes. Scissors and tape as well. So go ahead and cut out the first 3 rows and assemble least to greatest. And keep those tabs on. And I want you to be thinking, like you were a second grader, what are you noticing is happening when you do that, when you start to cut apart?
So there's more grids than you need to cut. So between the 2,
Yeah, you can
3 rows and 1 grid.
you can just cut 1 grid for 2 people. Just cut 3 rows and start to assemble. See what you notice.
We have blank grids if you want to take one with you, or
So on this grid, you're going to want to cut across on the rows and leave that white tab. Can I borrow yours real quick?
oh, this is a good time for you to do the row and column dance.
So cut across on this row
Go.
and cut each one and start to go from least to greatest and connect them with their tabs, and you'll tape them together. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, you're totally exactly right. So while you're cutting, I will say this. How I introduced it to you all is exactly how I would say to my kiddos. I wouldn't give a whole lot of, what is this? What are we doing? It would be from me saying, just start cutting it. What are you noticing? What do you wonder when you see this? And those 2 questions come up all the time in my classroom. What are you noticing? It's okay. There's tape. It happens every time. I'll give us about another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll go ahead and move on. And you can go ahead and just tape those first 3 or 4 rows. You don't have to cut all of them. You'll start to see. Excellent. What are you noticing? You count by one each time. Great observation. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and continue on for purpose of time. What I would ask my students then, what did you notice? And what my students noticed it's a number line. And so many of them did not have the realization that a hundredths grid was actually, when you cut it apart, is actually a number line, and it's condensed in its form. There were many aha moments, and it was from that moment that I realized how many times had my students had experience with the number line. Besides the desk plate on their, the nameplate on their desk that was only to 30, or my number line on the wall, how many times have they held it in their hands and seen, oh my goodness, one of the kids goes, it's so long. They didn't realize just the magnitude of how much was on that chart. And so there were some great aha moments for that. And from there, what we did is we started talking about skip counting, and we built off of that with many number line activities. Now, when I talk about skip counting, we didn't just stay with the traditional rote memorization, like Maria was touching base on earlier. We didn't just say, okay, skip count by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8, because we know that it's not memorization isn't always knowing, isn't knowing. And so we would say, let's do skip count by 2 starting at 3. Well, skip count by 5 starting at 7. And so we did these these skip counting activities all the time. When you need bathroom breaks, when you need that just 2 minutes, when you're supposed to be somewhere, you're a little early, you need to have a little wait time. Okay, we would do that all the time in the classroom. And so this transitioned into some station activities as well. We had these number lines went ahead, and we would start in the middle, and they would have to go both sides and figure out what the rule was, what they were skip counting by. And you can see it's not what you would call a traditional skip count. And it really forced my kids to think, what does skip counting mean? And so what that looked like is we continued with activities. We would play games to practice. We would play I have, who has cards, and we would talk about +1s or 10 more, or 2 less. And here's a picture of some of our kids playing this game. We would continued practicing with our skip counting and build fluency. We're missing a picture, but I will tell you about this game. This one is called Salute. And what it is where a child has a deck of cards, and let's say I have an 8 down here, and I have a 2, and Maria is my partner, and she's going to tell me that my sum is
10.
So I know that there's an 8 here, and that the sum is 10, so I must have the add-in 2. And so both partners are working, both partners are engaged, and so that's another way we implemented some of these activities in the classroom. I feel like we're missing a slide.
So, as you transition it, you could pick up the red bins and then ask them back the other way, take your tape and scissors and any scraps you have in there, and then I'll pick the red bins up on the other side. You can keep whatever part of it you want to keep.
Okay, so the next part, we are going to dive into some more activities. Now, like I said, we started out with the number grid. We broke it apart. We talked about how it's a number line. We lived in the space of skip counting. We skip counted on the number line. We skip counted on the number grid. We talked about patterns that we saw. So with that in mind, that was kind of the going conversations. And the next step, what we did is we're going to bring you down to our lovely rug that we brought with us today. It's just tape. But we're going to take you through the exact activities that we took our students through. So what we're going to do, you can all come and gather. Group.
Wait a second. So if you're in the back row, you're going to be 3. This row right here is going to be 2s. This row in the front, and then all of you in the back 2 spaces, if you're coming down, are going to be 1s. Okay?
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So if you are the 1s, would you come and sit on the perimeter of the carpet, but not this back wall, just on the blue tape?
Bring your phone to take pictures.
You are more than welcome.
You might want to do that. That's you. And then 2s and 3s, you're going to come and just kind of be spectators. Come on down here to be spectators the first time. Not that side, but just along the blue. Yes, absolutely. Okay, you're going to work in groups of, 2 to 3, or just your neighbors. Oh my God! Oh, oh, absolutely. Okay. We'll make the 3 groups here. You 3 can be a group, and then a group here, and a group here. All right. Okay. Will you start at 51 and build from least to greatest? Will you start at 41 and build up from least to greatest? What did you say? They have 21. Do you have a 31?
Oh wait, 31? 41, sorry. We're at 130. So we're okay. Okay, quick teacher note. These strips are made out of just poster paper, and we just made long strips, taped them together, and then drew the lines. Okay, great.
And maybe turn them around so we can start making a number line starting over here in this corner. So we'll start with 1 in the corner. All the 2s and 3s right now are going, okay. Like across? Yes. This way, can you start with and go across this way so that we can all see it?
That's good.
Okay, and then who's ever got the next number, can you continue on with that? I'm sorry, and I'm
So you want to make number line least to greatest. Mm-hmm. And then this group, go ahead and make the number line. Continue on. And connect where it's continued in a number line. Well, we have to stay on the carpet, though.
So what's happening? How come it's turning the corner? The rug's not big enough.
How can we?
The rug's not big enough. Your desk isn't big enough. The wall's not big enough, which is how we ended up with 100 scripts. But our kids don't know that. We just hand them this thing like it's supposed to be some super amazing map for them, and it's totally confusing for them. So we made Rachel's kids do this.
So when my kids got to here, they said, "Well, we're out of room," and I was like, "You are out of room. What are you going to do about that?" And they thought about it for a little bit, and they thought, and they kind of talked, and they pondered, and so then they brought this row.
What you guys automatically did was not so automatic for the kids.
And pulled it underneath. And then the next row, they pulled it underneath.
You grab this over there. And 31, come on up. So if you think about this, there's a huge difference in putting an alphabet up on, because it's just A to Z, right? And they're just letters in isolation, but a number grid is not in isolation. It all has a ton of meaning. And so we made them build this, and they got stuck on the wall going out the window, and then that was a huge change for them. They really realized that we cut apart that number grid and made a number line, and if you take a number line, you can make a number grid out of that, and it really changed their thinking. It seems like a simple thing, but it meant so much.
And one thing I would do as a teacher, I would rotate it so it's facing my kids, so that way they have spot on. You all can turn, you have the idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
But it's important for them to see, just like when we took it apart and, oh my gosh, it's so long, I didn't realize this, that they make that same connection and put it back together. Oh, that they needed to see it both sides. And so from here, we talked about patterns that we had been skip counting by. What do you notice as you go? And we talk a lot about rows, row the boat across, columns up and down. What do you notice in the columns going up and down? What's happening? Remember, you're thinking like a second grader.
What would you say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What other patterns do you notice? Okay, all the ones are the same.
Can you give us an example of that?
The first block, there's only one.
Okay.
Are you talking about this? Yeah, like 1, 11, 21. They all have one little block. Yeah. So, teacher talk, we would make the kids say that. You said 1, 11, 21, 31, 41, so that you were saying it because someone else isn't seeing what you're seeing. Okay, awesome.
So ones, if you could switch out, and twos, if you could come in, that would be awesome.
So we would do this activity one day, and then a few days later, we would bring out the big map.
I'm going to put some in here too. Yes, can I have that?
Side note, at a conference this summer, we had these yardsticks, and they kept banging up against everything, and we went fancy this time. Okay, so teacher talk. A few days passed, we would come back to the carpet, because one of the reasons I love doing carpet work is the conversations. Something that one person may say, another person may not be thinking about it. And so when you're using hands-on and you're talking about it, it gives an opportunity for someone else who might not be thinking about it. So from here, I want you to put your second grade hat on, and I want you to be thinking, okay, I'm going to ask you to come up and build some numbers. And by build, I'm going to point, and I want you to build what should be in that box, okay? Knowing what you know about patterns, knowing what you know, what we've discussed so far, the hundreds grid, breaking it apart, putting it together, okay? So you want to build on that side, I'll build on this side? Okay. All right, would you come and build this number right here? Yes, you can come and build with a partner. And there's some blocks over here. Okay, would you all come and build this one right here?
Okay, the next two, will you guys come and build this?
Would you all come and build this one right here? I will.
Build this one right here.
Will you two build this number over here? Will you come back and build this one here?
The next two, will you come and build this one right here? You get the last.
Okay. Will you all come and build these two numbers?
So, teacher talk while they're finishing. We did this on purpose so that everybody's looking at the grid. We don't let our kids sit back here when they do it, because otherwise they're reading upside down, and that's super confusing.
Okay, so, oh, go ahead.
So as we're waiting for the last building to happen, so see if you are reading and seeing the same patterns that you saw, we would say listed kids, when we did this yesterday in the small strip. So see if what you're seeing represents the patterns. And the green shirt and the, what's your name? Claire. Claire, that we would have said like Claire was saying yesterday with the ones. So see if when you read this, if you feel like what we've done really represents the patterns that you saw in the number grids. And I will tell you, our second graders, they would come and do this really good.
And making sure it's all the same. Okay, one other thing I'd like to point out is, so we've gone through, we talked about what do you notice, okay, being in the same 5 column. Now, we'll talk about this more on this next activity too, but sometimes there'll be a child in the class that might put down a wrong number. And the instinct is to quickly correct it. And I will say this, it is so hard, and I remember in the program telling us, wait time, wait time. I'm sure you've heard that all through your program. And it's so hard, and you just want to jump in and save it. But
We had that over here. It was really lovely.
the correction,
We did.
yes,
We did.
we
had
did?
that opportunity
We
over here.
did?
You didn't even know we did it.
It went by me.
Just happened.
But the opportunity, if you wait, there's 2 things that can happen. One, it allows that one kid whose gears are turning, they notice something's not right here. And they have to explain why it's not right. And it's so powerful for other kids to hear that and see, oh, why is that not correct? And so I just want to encourage you all, when it is something's incorrect, be hesitant to jump in and see if, do we notice anything else on this chart? What do you think we're set? Anything that we can do? And let them become the problem solvers. Anything else? Next. All right.
Okay, 2 switches, 3.
Switch out.
I'm going to pour this literally. Your
Okay.
cards are on the podium, I think.
They're right here.
You want to shuffle?
Mm-hmm. Okay, the next activity, we'd come back the next day. Now remember, we've done concrete. Now we're going pictorial. The next day we'd come back with these base 10 cards, and we would say this is a silent activity, meaning we're not talking to our neighbors on this. What does that look like? We'd go through all of that. And I would pass out the cards, 1 or 2 for my kiddos. You might get a few more because you can handle it. And I would say, I want you to build this chart. And that's all I'm going to say. Okay. So maybe 3. Sorry if I gave you 4.
Whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and put your card on.
Okay, so 2 things that happen, teacher hat on now. I've seen it happen both ways in my classroom. What you all did is you recognized the patterns, and you knew I didn't have to wait for something before or after my spot to put mine down because I recognized +10, -10, +1, -1. I've had a group that did that, which is really fun to see. I've also had a group that sat around the carpet and waited for the first one to go, then the next kid to go, and the third kid, and the fourth, and so on. And it got to the point where some were like, it's your turn, no talking, but that doesn't always work sometimes with second graders. But they went one by one by one, and I realized that group needed some extra practice in recognizing those patterns. And the power of doing this activity helped me to quickly see the needs of my students as well. And so this allowed me, this activity didn't just stay here at the carpet. Most of our activities start here, but then we took it out into stations. And we took it out, some stayed a little bit longer, and some went out and we started to do other things. And we're going to show you how this translated to stations. So thank you all for your, one more thing.
Before you go. So you guys may have noticed that these are pretty organized. Anybody, and how I was putting the ones down, do you have any thoughts about that? So because we did so much subatizing and because the kids talk about even and odd numbers, really starting in first grade and again in second grade, we really try to make it as visual as we can for them. So when you organize your ones in pairs, it really helps them recognize what's going on. So we got to the point where we didn't have to do it very often. When we did it like maybe once or twice, and they would kind of self-correct. Not that we asked them to, but they would come up and put 7 down in 2, 2, 2, and 1. So they were being able to really quickly, easily see, is this an even number or an odd number? started, and it was really helpful for them, and we've kept it going, and they really seem to absorb it too and make a difference. So
We'd again talk about the patterns afterwards. With that being said, like looking at the same rows too. Okay. All right. Thank you, students. All right. So we're going to go through the next part. I'm going to show you how this activity transferred into stations. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so this is when we built with the students. As you can see, we had all of them around. We built just like you all did. They had that same experience. Now, this was not finished. We didn't just leave it and move on to the next thing. This became a living museum in my classroom, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But how we took that activity into stations is that we built these T's, basically, or cross. We would roll a dice. They would build the center number, and then they had to build plus 10, minus 10, plus 1, minus 1. And then we would also differentiate, and we would have to see what patterns do you see here? The plus 9, minus 9, plus 11, minus 11, and we continued. Now, while I had some students building on paper or with the concrete models, I had others going ahead and doing it by pencil and paper. Then we would, later on, we built over 100, and we talked about how going from 99 to 100, you are still, or 99 to 109, I should say, you are only increasing by 10, okay? And then in the spring, this was our powerful picture with my little grant, we built over 1,000, and that was huge. And so, like Maria said, these are not all my base 10 blocks. We rated all of first grade, second grade, basically the school. And we used whiteboards as kind of the backdrop. And so we built from 999 over to 1,000. And so we talked about what does that look like? And a lot of the kids said, well, you're going to be adding by 100. But because of the foundational work that we had done in the fall, where they saw that by each row, you're adding 10, they were able to see, oh, even because it's larger numbers, I'm still applying the same rule. Numbers may get bigger, but the rules stay the same. And that was really powerful for them. And so one other thing I'd like to say is we did it on the whiteboards, and we were able to write the number there as well. And so they were able to make that connection from what the picture was as well as what the written number. So this is building over 1,000. Anything else on that, Maria? Okay. So your students demonstrate fluency through 5 and 10. Now what? So we moved into decomposing. So Maria is going to be passing out some of these base 10 boards, and double 10s frames, I should say, and red and yellow counters. And so when you get this, you can build this with a partner, and they're coming for you.
And if you can kind of do like one for everything, you might need to put a desk up in the middle.
I'll go take it. Okay, so go ahead and build this number, 9 plus 2. 9 plus 2. 9 plus 2. Side note, while y'all are getting set up, again, we would come to the carpet. These are on whiteboards. They have the giant size of your red and yellow chips, but it's okay if you don't have those because you can make them out of construction paper or the pizza disc. Those work as well. So all of these activities you can do in your classroom, whether you have the foam chips or not, you're able to make all these materials. Okay, so you've built 9 plus 2. What do you know? I want you to decompose and see that 9 plus 2 is the same as 10 plus 1. 10 plus 1. So we would talk about decomposing means to break apart. And so I can see the 10 in my mind and know, oh, that's just one more. So let's try another one. build this at your seat. Build this at your seat. 9 plus 4. 9 plus 4. What is 9 plus 4? Well, 9 plus 4 is the same as 10 plus 3. So I know that 9 plus 4 is 13. 9 plus, yes, 13. Okay? Anyway, this is how it would look like on our carpet. We would start out with, okay, what is 9 plus 2? Then I'd say 9 plus 2 is the same as 9 plus 1 plus 1. And I would be recording it on the board as well. And then we'd say, okay, so 9 plus 1 plus 1 is the same as 10 plus 1, which equals 11. So, and this is the powerful part, go back to the original equation. So 9 plus 1, or 9 plus 2 is 11. And so we did this over and over and over, and we talked about how the kinesthetic is so powerful for kids. I know y'all have talked about that a lot in your program. And we talked about that on the rug. And from there, then the kids got their own personal boards like you did. And then it moved into stations. And so keeping everything like we've talked about today, going from concrete to pictorial to abstract. And it's important to keep that. As we move through, I would have kids, some still building with me on the carpet and some using a pictorial model. And that's okay. It doesn't mean one kid understands and one doesn't. It's just where they are on their understanding. And so add and subtract, making by 10. We did this. We lived in this for a long time. And we love it. And once the kids click with it, they want to do more. And so we started here. And we moved to the pictorial. So we have the pictorial on the left and the abstract on the right. And what's really important is to also make sure that what they're doing over here reflects what they're doing on this side. So not putting 9 plus 3 plus 1, because that's not the same action that they did over here. Okay, so making sure your moves reflect in your abstract. So we did this, and this was another one of our stations, or activities. Well, one of my kiddos came up, we used the 9s a lot, and we talked about the 9s trick even. We even called it the 9s trick. And one of the kids said, well, I think it works with other numbers. And I said, well, great. Come show me. Show us your thinking. And so he said, well, 8 plus 6. I can do 8 plus 2, and then I just add 4 more. So it's 10 plus 4. So I know 8 plus 6 is 14. And I said, you know what? You're exactly right. You can apply this to other numbers as well. And so what that looks like for differentiation in the classroom, like I said, I had some kids still moving chips, while I had other kids rolling a blank die with a spinner, and they were building larger numbers. Now let's go back and see, you still have 9, 7, and 8. You're always building over a 10. And we talk about that. You may not be on this double tens frame, but you're always going back and forth over a 10. And when they understand that concept, just like the thousands place, they realize, oh, 59 plus 7 is not any different than when I did 9 plus 7. And they're able to apply and able to see it for larger numbers as well, which is really cool. And they think they're really big and smart, and they are. That's because they are. Okay, so last touch on this. This became a living museum. Went ahead, glued this all on my wall. And every unit that we talked about, every concept, we began to add it to the museum. And so what that looked like is then my kids began to, it anchored their thinking that, you know what, 2 o'clock, 2 hours is the same value, or 2 is the same value in 2 hours as it is in 2 cents, or the number 2, or Roman numerals 2. That's not in our TEKS for 2nd grade, but I had a student come up and say, what are Roman numerals and what do they look like? And that became his independent project to add to our living museum. And so this became something for the kids to continue to look at. It's obviously quite large in my classroom, and it became an active resource for them. Okay, so Maria's going to wrap us up.
So you're probably like, what were you guys doing with CD cases? Literally, I got those from the tech department. They had boxes of them free. And I got spinners off of Amazon and made sheets to go in there, so it was great. So just a quick wrap up. So number sense literally leads our kids to just really have powerful thinking. This is all before they've ever formally been taught an addition or subtraction algorithm, and it's great. So then they started doing combinations like this on an open number line. How they get to 85, they know, is not our most, that they get to 85 is not the most important thing. How they get there and that they can share their thinking is. So just a little word about vertical extensions. So I coordinate math for 1st through 4th grade at our school, and I teach in the middle school, so I get what happens with our kiddos as they go up. Our 3rd grade teachers this year said the kids have never had this powerful of thinking as they do this year. And so this year's 3rd graders were the first ones that we did this big pull-off unit with. And so the extensions, if you think about just 5 plus 7 as a fact in isolation, but if you think about it like this, it follows them for a long time, even into their fraction work, which really can make or break a kid's secondary math career. So more vertical extensions, I alluded to this earlier. And so we would just say, as you are thinking about your self-contained career, or even if you're looking at considering going to an elementary classroom that's content focused and you can be a math teacher, just keep this balance in mind, because we need kids and adults that have literacy and numeracy as a focus in their lives. So we obviously love to collaborate together. We do it in a lot of things. And these are our Twitter hashtags and our emails, and I'm sure you guys have been talking a little bit about as you transition out. You can have a robust Twitter PLN because there's so much great things happening out on Twitter. It has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with education. So keep all that in mind. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So we're going to transition now, and remember you guys did a big survey. Rachel's going to address some of the questions that you asked in that survey.
So thank you all firsthand for sending questions in. It really helped to kind of narrow in what I could talk to you all about today. Quick background, Dr. Fuentes is pulling that up. Obviously, I went to TCU, graduated in 2012, did the 4-1, graduated in 2013. From there, I went on to Birdville ISD, just a little north of here, and taught at Grace Hardeman Elementary School for 3 years in 2nd grade. After that, I moved down to Houston and had the opportunity to start at River Oaks Baptist School in 2nd grade. And so since then, I've had the opportunity to partner up with Maria. I've gotten to speak at several conferences so far and work with our technology team as well. So just from what your topics were or your questions, I've narrowed down to these topics. I'm going to try to leave some more time as well at the end. But these are some of the topics that seemed like the most interest to you all. And so I think the heaviest hitter was the master's program. I can only speak from my own personal experience, but for me, the master's program, the 4-1, was one of the best decisions. I absolutely loved it. It was so much fun. I learned a lot. And some of the questions that I want to address today is, why this program over another program? Or if I'm going out of state, is it really that important to take a master's program here in Texas? Well, I will say this. The master's program, and I had the opportunity to take even a class from Dr. Fuentes in the graduate program. The content was wonderful, but what I valued the most from the 4-1 was the skill set. And how I approach my teaching, how I approach some of my curriculum planning, how I approach even having the opportunity to present is because of the graduate program. And so if you have the opportunity, I would say do it. Whether it's here in the 4-1, whether it's another academic program, I would highly recommend the graduate program. How soon, I'm sorry. Did I enjoy it? Yes, I absolutely loved it. Is it competitive? It's collaborative, and that's what's really important. Your cohort, especially your graduate one, becomes like family. And it's really fun, especially as you go out into your first jobs. They were my front line and number one resource my first year. And I'll talk about first year in just a second. But the program itself, I understand now it's more of the accelerated where you can specialize into one or two. That wasn't the case for me, and we wrote treatises and did a little bit more research, and I think y'all are working more on the proposal side. But still, like I said, the skill set was just so valuable, and I think it's really worth your time if you are able to do that. So I can come back and answer more questions on that one if we can circle back, but I want to make sure and go through. As far as finding a job and first year teaching, one of the questions was, when did I start preparing? And it's always important to be prepared. So as far as if you're finishing up your senior year or if you're in your graduate program, have your resume, always be prepared for whenever an opportunity is ready. One question asked, what TCU resources are available? I will say this, and I will continue to promote this school because of the resources, but over at the Career Services, I don't know if you're aware or not, but there is a College of Ed specialized, someone in there specialized for the College of Ed to help you with resumes, cover letters. You can go in and practice for interviews. And not just as an undergrad. When I applied for a new job out of Birdville and moved down to Houston, 3 years post-graduating, I contacted Chris O'Rourke, and he helped me again update my resume, practice with interviews. So it was an excellent resource. Other biggest resource here on campus as you're applying for jobs are your professors. Quite honestly, it was because of my professors that allowed me to have my first initial job. They were aware of an opportunity in a school, and so they said, hey, I have this student. Why don't you email your resume and say you were one of my students. Your professors are your front line. They write your recs. They're great resources. And so I will say that as far as resources. Looking for jobs as well. You have the opportunity at TCU to experience so many different placements. Stay in touch with those teachers that you get to mentor under. Find out what openings they have at their schools. I will also say, as far as finding a job, I remember, in the school world, we think of the year August to May, whereas the rest of the world thinks of like an actual calendar where a year starts. So in reference to our school year, I think it's a little scary being a senior and getting closer to graduation and not knowing where you're going to be teaching next year or what you're doing for a job next year. But also keep in mind that a lot of you will probably enter the public schools in March or April, May. They're standardized testing. That's when that's happening, and that's their front focus. And so job hiring sometimes is in May, late May. Even some of my friends received a job in June. So don't panic. So that's one of my tips for you as well, which is like, oh great, don't panic, I don't have a job. But I promise, all my class, we all went out into the workforce. It happens. What advice would I give to first year teachers? Your first year is memorable, both good and ways that you can learn from. The best analogy I heard is your first year of teaching is like flying a plane and building it at the same time. You're halfway through the year and you have one wing. So there's a learning curve. You can be as prepared as you can, and TCU does an excellent job. I can say that. One of the questions was, is there anything you wish you had known different or been more prepared? And I will say this, every year presents a new challenge, but I will go back to the graduate program, I will go back to TCU. The skill sets you are being taught now will empower you and prepare you to address any challenge that comes up. And so it's comforting to hear that as well. Something I knew I wish before going into my own classroom. Like I said, the first year is a learning curve, but one thing I will say is lesson plans. Now, you can think about your projects and the lesson plans that you've done in the classes for your undergraduate program and think of the long, lengthy pages that you've done and the elaborate lessons and the time that you've spent for one lesson, and the idea of doing that for 5 times a day for every day seems overwhelming. And I will say this, those lengthy lesson plans are really valuable because you're really critically thinking about every step of the classroom and every question you might be asking your kids. But when you get into the classroom, that becomes second nature of what you have. So you're not listing every question and you're not listing every objective. And it becomes just innate. And so those lengthy lesson plans start to shorten. And so that was intimidating to me, thinking, how am I going to write a 20-page lesson or whatever it is every day for 5 subjects, 5 days a week? It becomes part of your skill set. But right now it's important that you really flush out and do those thorough lesson plans because then it will become second nature. So that's what I have to say as far as advice for first years. Students in differentiation, is it okay to move on with the lesson if a student doesn't understand? Quite honestly, it comes down to your district and your school. I'm going to jump back up real quick. During the interview process, when you're looking at schools and looking around, I know it's kind of nerve-wracking being like, just please anyone hire me. I just need to be employed, which is true. But when you are on that side, realize that you are also interviewing your school, and that's important too. And it's important to ask questions. It's fun because I've been on both sides now being a teacher. I've gotten to interview at several schools and I've gotten to now interview teammates, and the candidates that always stand out most to me are the ones that are prepared, the candidates that are come with questions and they inquire. They ask about our curriculum, they ask about schedules, they ask about how grading is done, what students grouping looks like. So come engaged, realize that you're also interviewing for a good fit. You're going to spend a lot of time, especially your first year at school, so make sure it's a good fit. Okay, so jumping down, student differentiation. Is it okay to move on? This is where your stations really become key. You may have a student doing one thing in one station and another student in another station. Also keep in mind, like we talked about with our number sense, when you talk about understanding, I fell into this where it was black and white of like they get it or they don't. And I think what's important to recognize is that students have a more understanding than we may realize, but they may be at a concrete level or they may be at a pictorial level. So when you're just giving a district's test, a CBA, a curriculum-based assessment around the district, and they're not passing it, they may look on paper that they're not understanding, but maybe put a model in front of them or picture in front of them, and they have a grasp of that concept. They're just not developmentally there yet. And that's important to say with your students, is not yet, and the power of yet. Other questions about students. How do you prepare students for struggling for standardized test? You, as classroom teachers, are constantly working with the students, whether it's in tutorials, whether it's your small group, whatever that may be, you're preparing the whole year for that test. And you're not wanting to teach to the test, but you're wanting to teach everything you can. So struggling students, extra time, extra practice, extra hands-on, everything you can do, you're pulling all your resources as you can. Let's see. I feel like I missed one. Let's talk about the number sense, the number talks. Now, I understand that there's this specific number talks book or curriculum, but I'm going to talk more in general about number talks as far as conversations. And is it important to do? Absolutely. The conversations like we showed you today at the carpet are so helpful and empowering to the students. What one person may say may start to turn the wheels for another. They may not say anything, but it said it got them thinking about it, that maybe later they may make a notice or wondering or have an observation about something that they didn't before. We are at the carpet in my classroom every day, hands-on, doing something. We're guessing in a jar this week, and just the conversations are huge. And you want to, like I said earlier, try not to jump in and rescue. You want to have that wait time, and sometimes it's really hard because it'll be like a solid 30 seconds and it's quiet, and you want to fix that. And I want, like I said, I want to encourage you to just let them sit in it and relax in it, and you build that community by that. I will say, from doing the number activity, the grid, from the fall, the reason why it was so powerful in the spring was because of their ability to communicate their ideas, to share what they were thinking, and their comfort with their classmates to take a risk and say, oh, I think we're counting by 100. It's like, well, I think we need to think on that some more. And so the willingness to take risk in your thinking happens in number talks. And so I really think those are powerful. Teaching and just teaching math. Let me find that page of your questions. What's one of the biggest struggles that you can come across when teaching elementary math to students? The wide range is sometimes very difficult. You will have a student, for example, this year I have a student I cannot keep up with. I'm constantly spinning my wheels. I'm going to Maria and saying, okay, well, she aced that one and we blew that one out of the park. What can we do next? And it's a challenge for me. And then I have others. It's like, all right, let's lay the chips down again. Let's try this, moving the red and yellow chips. And so the range is hard, but it's also really fun. And I think it's really important to see, it's not just, like I said, not a get it or a don't. There's a large range. Someone asked about, do I think math has changed since I've been to school at TCU? And I don't really have a frame of reference as far as math changing, but I will say how I teach and approach math is different from when I was at TCU to now. I'm way more hands-on activities. I spend more time in my conversation with number talks. I spend more time in stations than I did, and my students are doing more and I'm doing less. And so, not like I'm sitting back, but like they're having more conversations. So I will say that as a teacher, that's how I've grown. I know if I've missed some questions, I'm going to go ahead and just open up the floor for like the last few minutes. If there are any additional questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. So. Yes? Students engaged, great question. For me, one of the management, I think it's really important that you establish your management right from the get-go. And saying that, realize that it's not just, okay, I'm going to work on management week 1, and then week 2 we're going to move on to curriculum. Not quite that way. It's more like, all right, it's October, and I think we finally are ready to go with the management. But how do you keep them engaged? Hands-on learning is great for kids, and they love it. They love being able to talk to their neighbor. They find engaging when they think, look what I just did, and they feel empowered. So empowering your students is another way to keep them really engaged. When you call anything a challenge with kids, they immediately rise to it, and they think, oh, I did the challenge, or they get really excited about that. Yeah.
So one of the things is, when you're passionate about something, it's contagious for young kids, it really is. And so you have to be super enthusiastic and eat your Wheaties or whatever you guys say in your generation. Not too much coffee because then you have your 1 o'clock total fall. But you have to just be careful about that. The other thing is how you really support independence and self-discipline in your classroom really is everything, and Rachel's really, really good at it. Whereas if you're doing something and someone's sharing a thought and someone else is talking, it's early September and you stop, those students that someone else is speaking. I mean, you're sending messages that people's thinking is valuable, and all of that really empowers them. That she cares about what I think, she cares about what you think. So you create literally your own super tight family, and that's really empowering for the kids. I mean, she literally, we give the kids these blank number grids and have them color them even, odd themselves and all that. She had kids come in early so that they could help color. So I mean, come on, she did math. She has a couple kids who are striving, we call our striving, because they are not there yet, who are asking for more of these decomposing problems to take home so they can work on them at home. I mean, just because they're at a place where they're seeing how valuable it is to just keep pushing themselves. So it's not that way for everybody, but you get there slowly but surely.
Kind of back on the number talks, one other thought I had. I know you all talk a lot about fostering that environment and fostering the community, but really I've seen the other side of it, and I remember hearing it in program and thinking, yeah, that's important, but it really is so important, because when you do have that community, they are able to take risk, and that's what's important too. Like Maria said, they are wanting to be eager and try more, because if they take a risk, they know it's okay if they don't get it or not. I forgot to touch on one question for the job search. Someone asked me, was it hard to find a job in Houston in a private school? Right out of the gate of TCU, I did look for a position in a private school. And pretty much across the board, they said, great resume, great qualifications. Why don't you go get a few years of experience under your belt and then come back? I will say that the master's program did mention that made me a little bit more marketable, but they said go get some experience first. So someone had asked that. Any other questions I can answer? All right, well, thank you all so much for having us today. It's been an honor to be able to come back. So.
If you have the red bins, if you wouldn't mind passing them to you guys and just put the counters in there.